Racers, today we will be talking about the meta, what was our predictions for the meta, how it shaped up during the whole set, and how the PQs ended it, and what is the aftermath of the domination of one of the decks. Okay, so let's start with our predictions. So this is the list of leaders that we piled up before the first tournament of the set starts. And it wasn't as accurate as we hoped.
Yeah. So, I mean, this list was quite accurate for the meta that we saw like in September mostly. So the early meta. And we saw a lot of Sabines, a lot of Boba Yellows, stuff like that. Not much of green Boba and Boss Blue, the decks that became really popular in later stages of the meta. Yeah, so Boba Green was definitely one of the biggest misses for us. So we thought that Boba Green is a C-tier deck, but he ended up at the moment he ended up winning a lot of planetary qualifiers, and he's really dominating. And just the reason why we played him in C-tier was because during that time, most people were thinking that ECL is still the way to go with Boba, but as it turned out, it's not really the case.
Yeah, the 30 HP base was just situated much better into the meta. The ECL had trouble winning versus Boba Yellow or Sabine Green, but 30 HP handled those matchups really well and didn't really lose that much versus the Kiras and Heart Controls. But we didn't expect, and we didn't even consider the 30 HP Boba to be a deck before this set, because ECL was so important for the leader in set 1. And we also didn't expect that Bosk Blue will be the go-to Heart Control. So we put Vader Blue or Aiden Blue, and we even put Aiden Yellow as a go-to Heart Control. But it turns out that Yellow didn't really play well into Heart Control as a Heart Control deck, and Bosk, because of his draw, the ability to draw, became like the strongest and most consistent Heart Control. But at the beginning of the meta, nobody was playing those decks, and there was a lot of creativity then.
Yep. Also, we were thinking that there are gonna be way more decks competitive in the meta. So there are decks like Jabba, who we gave benefit of the doubt during the creation of the deck of the tier list. So we thought that since he has the really strong early game with the bounty-oriented hunters, we were thinking that he's gonna be quite strong. But the fact that when he deploys, his body is quite weak. Like he deploys really late, and he seems similar to Palpatine, but he's nowhere close in terms of power level. And basically, the green Boba really outshined him in this color combination.
Yeah, I think it's also because the core cards for Jabba is in yellow, and I think if there was a possibility to play him with blue, he might be better. Because in Cunning Command, he was competing with too many strong leaders. We also didn't anticipate that Cad Bane and Kylo would be playable at all. But even I don't think those decks are really strong. They are strong enough to win some games and get into the top 8s of a big tournament.
They just appear here and there on some bigger tournaments, but I don't think any of those win any big tournaments.
Yeah.
Like maybe some of them won like a showdowns, but I don't think any of them won like a PQ or something like that.
I think Cat Blue won like a bigger tournament, like a 100 people tournament, but I also think this deck took people off guard and they didn't know how to play versus it. And after that tournament, when people tested it, it just faded out because it wasn't really that strong. Okay, so let's take a look about the best part of the meta for me.
Yeah, so this is largely the meta that we saw in August and the early parts of September. So the time where we had GenCon and Wu won it with his Kira ECL, Sabine and Boba Yellow were really dominating during that period of time. They were by far the most of their decks. Also, Han Yellow was there and Han Blue, and our deck that maybe wasn't as popular, but we were really glad that we chose this deck to play on the tournaments, and
Yeah.
that can explain why.
Yeah, Han 2 ECL was really well situated into the meta at the beginning, because without Boba Green and Bosk Blue, it was basically favorite versus most other matchups if played correctly. And I don't think it picked up because this deck is extremely hard to play, and it requires tons of practice versus every single matchup, because you can't play this deck on autopilot. Versus every single leader, the deck like flips completely. You can play aggro, you can play discard, you can play late game. And for me, this was the most fun I had in Star Wars Unlimited to play this deck. Sadly, when Boba Green came into the picture, the deck, I think it has about 10% win rate versus Boba Green 30 HP. So we really couldn't play it after the early stages of the meta, because I don't want to go to the tournament and have a matchup that is completely lost when I see my opponent.
That's definitely a big problem. Like Han is by default doing weaker against decks that have barrage, and in terms of those 5 decks that you can see on the screen, only Kira was basically running it, and Kira was running it, sure, but she wasn't really that fast, so we could just side in home ones and create dragons and win in late game. But against Green Boba, that's not really an option because Boba has still a lot of damage output with such a powerful leader with armor, moles, and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I think with Kira this matchup is much more playable because with Han you don't really care if your units are killed, and this is what Kira was mostly doing. She tried to clear the board and dominate in the later stages of the game, but Han had a lot of units that came ready or dealt damage instantly, so it was easy to finish the game. But versus Boba, the biggest problem was Boba. 4/7 stat line that comes a turn earlier than you if he ramped, and you're one barrage of losing the game.
Yeah. So I guess now we can move on to the mid meta.
Yeah. So
or whatever you called it.
Yeah. Mid set meta. I think we can separate the mid-set meta with one really huge change, is that the fact that people stopped playing Kira. Because even though at the beginning Kira was well situated into playing versus the less refined, slower decks, after that she struggled a lot versus like Sabine, Boba Yellow, Han Blue. And when Kira began to fall off, and for me at least, Kira is the best counter for Boba Green. And then there was a tournament that was won by the 54 cards Boba 30 HP, and people started to see, oh, this deck is really good.
Yeah, like it's a quite big sign if a deck that runs more than 50 cards, so it was 54, is winning a big tournament, then it means that if someone's gonna refine the list to play that sweet spot of 50 cards, the deck is gonna be really strong. So it took a little while, but yeah, this was the time where people started to pick up on the fact that Boba Green might be really strong deck with 30 HP base.
Yeah, it's also the time when Bosk won one of the bigger tournaments, and people like, oh yeah, this is a hard control that doesn't lose to this card. And Bosk started to gain popularity. So we finally got a hard control in the meta. So even though there were more, like the new decks came to the meta, because of how dominant Boba Green became, a lot of decks fell out, and we end up in the meta with a like really low amount of decks. And it was just before PQs started. So like this, what we are seeing is, for me, it's the core meta of the end of like the big tournaments and start of planetary qualifiers. And planetary qualifiers, let's go, as we've seen for like 3 weeks of it, there is one clear winner of what is the strongest leader in the set.
Yep. So it became really apparent that Boba Green is the strongest deck, and he was winning a lot. Like, I don't have the numbers, but I feel like he won like between 10 to 15, maybe even more planetary qualifiers. So that's a lot. I think there was like even 1 week when he won like 8 planetary qualifiers, if I recall correctly. Maybe I'm missing something, but
yeah, it was basically 30% of the top 8 were Boba Green, and the second most popular deck was Boba Yellow. And I think there was a planetary qualifier that had like 7 out of 8 spots were Boba. Of course, there are other decks that was winning, so Bosk won at least one. Sabine was in the top 8 of a lot of them. The same for Han Blue or Ray Red, because decks play a little bit similar. And Han Yellow became the only Han that people played. Han Green was completely out of the meta at this point. And Kira came back because Boba came back. So
yeah, exactly. So it was quite funny to see her back. But yeah, it makes sense to play Kira because she, by design, is quite strong against Boba with all the power of Dark Side and option to kill Boba quickly with Kira deploy.
Yeah, and also because of the return of Boba, a lot less people were playing Sabine. Because Sabine doesn't really have a great matchup into Boba Green. And Sabine was the biggest problem for Kira. So that's why we saw her on the rise in the last week of PQs. But yeah, Boba Green, the 30 HP, with a decent sideboard versus hard control, I don't think right now it has any bad matchup. When we were playing it on our last tournaments, I never felt like I'm behind. I always felt like I'm the player who like shows control on the game, and it's up to me if I win or lose. And if this continues in set 3, if Boba is still this dominant, I personally think he should be banned. I think it will be healthier for the game if he were banned. And I don't think restricting cards for him would do anything, because even without Fire Spray or armor, he would still be a strong leader. Too strong.
Yeah, the fact that makes Boba Green so strong is ramp. So the fact that you can play ramp, deploy Boba early, get the basically 8 resource on third turn is all the value, because there are basically very few answers to him at that early stage of the game. So there is stuff like Power of the Dark Side, and besides that, there is not really much you can do about Boba deploying this early. And yeah, if Boba plays something like Sneak It Lucky on when he ramped, kills one of your free drops or something, untaps 1, deploys, gets 2 more resources, plays armor or whatever, then for a lot of decks that's basically GG. So yeah, Boba Green is really strong, and we'll see if FFG is gonna do anything about that.
Yeah. I was discussing with a lot of people what can be done to Boba, and we came the conclusion that there is like two ways to balance him. Of course, he may not be oppressive in set 3, because there is a lot of new cards, there is a lot of new leaders that may counter him. For example, I think Yoda can be a counter to Boba, because Han 2 Blue or Ray Tarkintan already had a really decent matchup versus Boba, but Yoda has a much more beneficial flip, but he may be too slow to stop him before. But there may be.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Yoda is enough. Like, I've played against a few Rays, so like in finals in Leyden. By the way, we're gonna probably do a review of the finals in a few days. But yeah, even Ray, like she's deploying on 6, and even that feels quite late. So I'm not sure if Yoda is gonna be enough to stop Boba.
Yeah.
To be honest, I feel like it's gonna be Dooku, if anything.
Yeah, that may be Dooku, or maybe the new Palpatine, or maybe some Force deck that emerges. We still didn't see all the cards. We see like 30 something card missing from the whole set. So, and as we saw on set 2, one card can make a new deck. So I don't think it's still like easy to tell what will be played in the third set. But for what to do with Boba if he was still this dominant, I think you can ban him. It would open up a lot of new leaders, especially in cunning vigilance, in cunning villainy. And the other thing, you can just make him to have 5 less HP on the base. Because, as we said before, Boba ECL wasn't really this dominant because he had 25 HP. And if you always had that 25 HP or 20 with ECL, I think it would be enough to not make him this dominant any longer.
I mean, making him start game with 5 less HP seems kind of weird, but yeah, I feel like that's the...
I would prefer...
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, there is not, like, it's gonna be up to FFG what they're gonna do, so yeah, we'll see.
It was like, I would prefer him to be banned, but if FFG wants to keep him around so people don't like be mad that they banned my favorite leader, or they banned something that I have showcase for, and making him start with 5 HP less is... he would still be playable. He would definitely not be as dominating as he is now. Yeah. In the few days, I think Sip will be recording a review of his final with his opponent from Leyden that you mentioned before.
Yeah, I think his name is Jasper or something like that. I might be misremembering, but it starts with J for sure.
So this will be something fun, and we will also be making a little bit of our predictions for set 3, but we want to wait for all the set to be released, because as I said, there can be cards that completely change how you look at other cards, especially right now when tags became much more relevant. So because of the cards like, now there are 2 of them that cares about what tag you have, a single card can really define the power of some other cards. So we want to wait to have the full set to do it. Yeah, thanks everybody for watching. And if you can, it will be much beneficial for us if you comment what deck you are most excited about to play in set 3. Because then we can try them and adjust what leaders we will be talking about in future videos.
Yeah.